Good afternoon, everybody. I think we can get going. So this session is all about things that move, I suppose. We're gonna start off with two Transnet presentations. Tuto Malaku from from the Center of Data Excellence at Transnet will start off the presentation.
All right, cool. Thank you. Good afternoon. It's the last session of one of the last sessions. We're standing between the teams and a beer, so it's either a good thing or a bad thing. But yeah, appreciate the opportunity. Tuto Malaka is the name. I have the privilege of being a public servant, and I work with that team over there. I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to that young guy there. His name is Ashley. He was actually supposed to be doing the presentation, but he didn't travel. That's Ashley's wife. The title is a bit of a misnomer, and I guess that's the problem when you hand in abstracts, right? Is that you get to think about what you want to speak about, and then by the time you present, the topic is a bit different. But in essence, it's going to be the same thing. But I was inspired by David's opening, from to aha. So I guess we titled it that, moving from to aha when it comes to data science at a state-owned enterprise. And again, a big shout out to the local LOC. They've made accommodations upon accommodations in spite of ourselves. So that's cool and greatly appreciated. So let's jump into it. So we'll just touch on a bit about the Center of Data Excellence, key attributes of Transnet, what we're solving for, how we work and why, looking at people, process, and technology, and actually the point of today, which is the hypothesis around an experiment that we wanna run. So we are here. So the Center of Data Excellence, which is a shorter name, a bit hipper, a bit cooler than Enterprise Information Performance Management, and it fits nice on a card too. We report into the Office of the CE, and we have a dysfunctional relationship with IT in the name. I think as we mature or get more understanding around the value of data and set up structures to kind of focus on it, it's still green areas with IT, because they think that they own the data and it's only their data and leave them alone. And what do you want? They sent you a new password. So that's coming along. But we take care of majority of the advanced analytics, data management, governance, but also data literacy. What we're picking up is that data literacy is an opportunity where a lot of organizations can do more and more. And then IT, traditional, just taking care of the apps, digitalization, technology, and the networks. Around our outputs, so the outputs in the main, they're about 5. We consider ourselves a very customer-centric. We don't even like to call ourselves a department. We're a platform, right? Because departments have walls. We're just like this open that you come and you go as and when. But again, the outputs are around data quality as a service, simulating and modeling as a service, applied research and development as a service, analytics as a service, and data literacy as a service. And we kind of split ourselves in two between your important data outcomes, our back office around the governance and the categorization and the data lifecycle, that boring bit, and the urgent outcomes, which are the front end stuff, which is what the users experience in the main, and that's the stuff that they like. But that stuff in the front end is only made possible by the stuff that is done in the back office, which is not as glamorous, but even more important. Just around our value proposition. So we'll go through what informs value proposition, but in the main, it's to develop one version of the truth, right? We spend a lot of time within our organization discussing facts, right? Everybody comes with an opinion, and I have an opinion, you have an opinion. Before you know anything, we've done nothing, but we've discussed about this opinion and we haven't made a decision. So that's what we try to deliver in terms of value, and to cultivate a culture of data literacy. I think we're Transnet in the main, and again, some historical stuff, but it's really opinions-based, subject matter-based. I feel this is the right thing to do. You know, I know that I've been here for 40 years, and what are you going to tell me and all that? And again, we're trying to get away from that and kind of say, wait a second, interpret the data for what it is, reach your conclusion, allow me to test that. And then once we've determined what the best decision is with this data set, then let's move forward. Our critical measure of success is a index that we refer to as the DQI. It's a data quality index, but it's, in essence, it's a composite measure that assesses the quality of our data across our value stream. Diversity is extremely important. So that little picture there is basically how the look and the feel of the team is. About 5 years ago, the mean age of the team was about 62 years old. That's come down to about 31-ish. I pick it up. I'm the problem. I'm the problem. So just again, and super important, right? Context. The team, we often talk about what are we solving for and what's the problem, and they get very frustrated, right? Because they feel like they're being pulled from pillar to post a lot of the time. And the answer is what we're solving for is a function of the question, right? So how far back are you going in asking the question, what's wrong? So that whatever you come up with in terms of answers speaks to the solve. But in the main, this is our history, right? So we're over 100 years old. These bars here are abstractions of our business in terms of output, which is tonnages. So we have, for the longest time, we only did general freight, right? And then somewhere around 1976 odd, we then split general freight, which is, think of it as your domestic trains, to your export coal and your export iron ore. These are these bad boys, these machines right here. The red is the sum total of it, right? Two really important time points. Around after the De Villiers report around 1988, 1989, that kind of said, don't invest in railways and deregulate it and do that. That was a really important data point because then it kind of drove a lot of the decisions that are resulting in where we are right now, and we can talk about that later. And then another really interesting data point around 2011, when I started there, 2011, 2012, we started looking at data seriously for the first time. And the reason why that is when an organization is born under regulation and protected by the law, you develop certain behaviors and attributes vis-a-vis if you're a startup, right? And you're not protected by anything and survival of the fittest, also attributes are developed, right? So data, if customer, what the customer wants, I mean, nobody really cares. You have to use us anyway, so we're not going to ask your opinion. All of a sudden, the customer value proposition started counting here, right? Efficiency kind of started counting here because now all of a sudden we're battling for market share with truckers and now we can't do how we used to do things for close on to 90% of our lives. Yeah, I think in terms of the percentage-wise, we've only been looking at data seriously for the last 10 years and some change. Before then, the only metric that mattered was tonnages at all cost. All right, so we've made one conclusion amongst all of our arguments, and that's that size matters. So we're a really, really big company. Revenue between 36 and 43 billion rands. Also, we have really expensive toys, COPEX and OPEX in the main between 26 and 10 billion. Our asset base is about 200 billion. That majority is the rolling stock. In terms of employees, it's about 27,800, split between train, crew, and management. About 2,000 to about 204 customers. We service in the main about 63 commodities. There are 30,400 track kilometers between, depending on who's counting, 1,008 and 2004 locomotives, 64,000 wagons. Our best year ever was 17-18 when we did 226 million tons. And last year we only managed to do 173 million tons. And we have about 921 unique origin destination combinations, which we traverse. All right, now how we work and why. So this is our value chain. So this is how the magic happens. Starting with strategy and business development all the way to customer service over there. Behind this is almost like an L1 view. Under this is about 5 more layers processes and SOPs, and. We conducted an assessment of the quality of the data, and that composite measure is basically based on the availability of the data, the reliability and the validity, and then we assign a score based on that. And our data quality index wasn't that great, so how we measure our success as a business improvement department is in the making that data quality index better, and that's done through standardization, process development, implementing systems, making role outputs consistent, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it's getting there. But this is how we measure the value that we add as a continuous improvement department, because it's sometimes not as tangible as some of the harder outputs, right? If it moves, we measure it. If it doesn't, we paint it. In our KPI universe, there's about 350 KPIs, of which we can account for 180. The difference, we're looking for them on Netflix and Amazon Prime, Disney Plus. Because so this is an abstraction of our KPI tree, which we try to link from the shareholder level, which is the Department of Public Enterprise, all the way to your ops and train drivers on the ground, how it kind of comes together. But yeah, there are lots of opinions in our business, like I shared, and that's where we're kind of seeing the differences. Another key metric for us is again, data quality, but data quality relative to moving from data to decision, right? So we are I'm gonna point. So we're somewhere here, but between 60 and 40 and 20, somewhere there. But in the main, we're in the descriptive realm, right? Our data quality index isn't at a point whereby we can start really leveraging our data to derive insight and even kind of move into this prescriptive space. There are some green shoots, but by no means are they where we want to be, right? So us going up this and spending a lot more time here, which means that we could do a lot more interesting analytics, and why we find so much value within OR, because I think it helps us accelerate this journey from data to decision. In terms of the work that we do, so we categorize it in terms of short, medium, and long, 3 months, 6 months, and over 12 months. The majority of it is within the efficiency space. We look at some rolling stock reliability, infrastructure improvement, people optimization, as well as customer service. The problem with the workload, right, is that it's too much on the short and not enough on the long, right? And that's because it's hard to think long term when the house is on fire, which is where we find ourselves, which is not an ideal situation, because the things that we need to do to make sure that the house doesn't catch on fire again won't necessarily stop the house from being on fire right now, right? So that's always super, super interesting, and a fight that we get into a lot of the times. All right. So around our hypothesis, so the changing operating environment. So in the main, we categorize our products and services into 5 buckets. So there's an export coal, export ore, export minerals, GF domestic, and GF export. And what we've seen is that our share in our export products and services has increased at the cost of GF domestic, right? And what we're hypothesis or the thinking is that given the energy issues that we have, a lot less companies are manufacturing and beneficiating local, right? So we're sending out a lot more raw, unprocessed material because there's no energy security. And it's kind of difficult to run a factory when you're not sure if there's going to be power. So as a result, these segments are growing for us, and these are shrinking, which means strategically now we look, okay, great, if we're becoming more export than domestic, what about our mandate to drop the price of logistics within the country? How does that kind of dovetail what we're seeing in terms of what the customers are demanding, right? So about 80% of our volumes now is destined to a port. Now, what does that mean around port capacities and the stuff that they do on that side, which is super, super important. So this is about 5 years worth of data. This is a visual of our process, okay? It looks complicated because it is, but we're going to try and uncomplicate it quickly. But in essence, what you have here are our yards, okay? So our trains depart from a customer siding, right? And then they go to a yard, right? They dwell at the yard where they're normally combined, and then they traverse on the main line, and then they arrive at the arrival yard, where they're uncoupled, and then they're taken to a customer siding where the load is offloaded, and then and then it comes back again, all right? So this process is referred to as T1, T2, T3, T4, time appointment. So nothing that fancy. That worked. I was a bit nervous. We account for our volumes here, though. We account for our volumes prior to operation, right? Which I guess makes sense. So we charge the customers, we invoice the customers prior to us moving their loads, which makes sense from a risk management. And I know the accountants are all happy and stuff like that, but is this phenomena in of itself not a problem? And I'll tell you why. So we have more loading sites than and loading capacity than we do offloading sites and offloading capacity. This fact is exacerbated by the fact that there's a higher dependence on export minerals, given some of the macro challenges. So in the main, we can load more than we can offload. So when you're accounting for volumes here, what does it then do further downstream in terms of creating bottlenecks? And then you have all sorts of issues with wagons standing under load and the likes. This is it's about 5-week view, right? And it's another theory that we're thinking of. But we would typically peak. This is a weekly resolution of performance. This is 3.4 million tons. This is all million tons. Every time we peak, we seem to take a dip, right? And this is our best output for the year, about 3.4 million tons, and that's subsequently followed by a dip to further kind of substantiate what we're thinking here, that we were designed to block out, and it takes us a couple of weeks after we've hit our peak to kind of regularize the system again. And then we hit another peak, and then we just kind of block out again, right? So it's repeating itself, and henceforth why the hypothesis in front of you saying that export flows that account for operational tonnages at T3 will have less variability than export flows that account for tonnages at T2, and I'll just go to this diagram quickly. So this is what we call T2, right? So at loading. And this is what we call T3, which is offloading. So the hypothesis says, let us account for operational volumes, no longer where we're loading, but rather where we're offloading, with the hopes that it won't cause that accordion, which is the hypothesis that we're going to test over the next just under a year in terms of delivery. But yeah, so we're hoping to share the results with you guys next year. If it works, it means that the entire business then will move from accounting for tons here and will account for tons at offloading, given the fact that our capacity looks like this. And that's all, folks.
Interesting questions that you have.
Oh, not interesting questions.
I've actually forgotten what the question is. And I think I can probably think of something quickly. There was a question. Sorry, I had a few questions in my head. Cool. They were competing with each other. It's been interesting. I found listening to the talks on system dynamics. I know you guys have also been here. I was wondering if you thought, that type of process might benefit you, because I am fairly familiar with the rail problem. It's extremely complicated. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the first answer is yes, right? You have to approach it from that paradigm of a system, right? And I think the point of departure is that we weren't built to be an efficient, lean, mean machine, right? So you kind of want to go back to first principles and say, okay, wait, what was the point? Why? Right? And kind of once you have the courage to ask those questions and be like, okay, cool, then I can't take for granted that because a lot of the time when you come into a business, you assume everything is there deliberately and on purpose, right? And especially with SOEs, because it's kind of it's kind of tricky how they started and why they started, and as a result, why they do a lot of things that they do. So yeah, so completely completely subscribe to that, right? And it's a lot of the work that we do is just to generally try to understand our system and how it breathes and why it does what it does, and what insight we can get from it.
Any other?
Another question.
Yeah, please go.
Go ahead, Dave.
Go ahead.
So you mentioned you were mostly in the descriptive space.
Yeah.
What's I suppose two things really, just out of interest, like how are you trying to then use descriptive analytics to obviously communicate with other people in the company, and how is that going? And then also, what really do you need to move to the predictive step? Do you think?
Yeah. I'm not sure if anybody wants to attempt an answer. Yes, no? So yeah. So we're one big math problem, right? Like when you look at railways, it's one big math problem. And I think we'd be not wise if we didn't acknowledge the fact that people in the main have a dysfunctional relationship with mathematics, right? So the minute you propose a math solve to a problem based on data, descriptive and/or, right, automatically it's kind of, I mean, the bane of my existence is we put together slides like this, and the first feedback that I'd get is, where's the commentary? I'm like, what commentary do you need? Like, look at the picture. No, you gotta put commentary, right? So we understand that we're a quantitative business that's managed really qualitatively, right? So in us moving up here, we need to kind of acknowledge that. The wins that we've gotten though, right? And what has given us some capital to kind of really push forward and move forward is what we have shown as a result of descriptive has been right? So now there's some confidence. So we don't really understand the math, but your answers are right, mostly. So then we can give you some more string to kind of come up again. The problem with that though, right, is our CEO is a lady that if a brute force algorithm was a person, right? She has a lot of, yeah, she's there. but that's a risk, right? It's a risk because the minute she's not there, then it means that we'll probably all get fired and stuff like that. So it's around not having a key man dependency around your data maturity structure, right? Which right now it's really dependent on the CE because she believes in it, because she gets value from it, and as a result pulls the rest of Exco with her. But what we want to do is we want to kind of help Exco understand the value, because of that qualitative management of a quantitative problem, right? I mean, the team will tell you that the minute you get a qualitative answer to a quantitative problem, then you know that you're kind of in trouble a little bit. Just a tad. I hope that was a horrible answer, David. I tried. Cool.
Any other?
Yeah, hi. So
Hello.
I think this is a really cool hypothesis. I would love to see what your results are in the end. I wonder if you were able to prove that it is true. So at the moment, you seem to be looking at optimizing the system going backwards, but it also seems like some of the solutions might lie in that interface with DMPA, isn't it?
TPT, yeah. So very true, right? So again, we assume that the port is strategically going in a direction whereby they're saying, oh shucks, we're getting a lot more stuff to send off, right? Which is not, can't assume that, right? But
so are you also pulling them into your?
we're definitely pulling them into it, right? And we have a lot of theories, lots of running, and one of them is that the interface between ourselves and the ports could be better.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of optimization opportunity there in the main, right? Between what they can offload per day and what we can deliver per day, when we don't make the contents wet and break their tipplers. But yeah, definitely, yeah. So we didn't explain, but the team, I think, will go in more detail in the presentation that's coming. So Transnet is a function of 5 ODs, operating divisions. So we're just one freight rail, the biggest. And then you have Port Authority, then you have Port Terminals and Transit Engineering and TPL pipelines, right? So we're all the ODs that then report back up. So we're, in essence, one company, but we sometimes to forget it from time to time. But yeah, no, that's very valid. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the question.
One last question.
Please.
And that is around, I mean, you, as a center of data excellence, and you've got the whole thing from data to decision making, your actions influence the entire economy. Pretty much the backbone.
Sure.
So of things that need to move. So my question is, to what extent are you able and willing to partner in terms of sharing that information to support national private sector players' decision making?
Yeah, I think Luciano and Chupisha will go into it more in their presentation, right? But we'd be foolish not to. One of the reasons why we push so hard to be a part of this is because we believe in think tanks, in tapping into academia and other industries and boutique consulting houses who are all geared towards kind of framing the problem and coming with a solve. I think media doesn't help because media makes it seem as if it's a zero-sum game in the sense that for us to win, you have to lose and vice versa. And it isn't like that by any stretch of the imagination. So we're really hoping that we'll be able to develop those relationships because we have a lot of problems and students in the main are looking for problems. So it's like a match made in heaven when you think about it, right? But yeah, definitely. And I think we're making a turn. I think gone are the days of transversal contracts around consulting, right? What we're trying to do now, and the team will go into it, want to scope really niche type briefs and make those incremental changes. I think we're done looking for the holy grail that's going to come and kind of you can't. We've learned that you can't, so we're going to stop. We're going to believe the results the first time. Should have done.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Should we start? Cool. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Luciano Naidu, and this is Chupisha Saasa. Chupisha is the lead on this presentation. I'm just going to be support and backup. So yes, we'd like to start off by giving a disclaimer in that by no means are you going to hear anything related to Garubi or Cplex and some knapsack algorithms. So I think the main objective of us attending ORSSA is to get a better understanding of the foundation on which we are able to apply these various methodologies that you guys have shared with us. I think at this point in time, we have a lot to deal with at the shop. And like Tatamilaka shared, we're looking to partner, firstly, create some awareness around Transnet to attract the correct talent, as well as just partnerships to solve these challenges and problems that we have. So our presentation will be giving a brief history on what we do as an organization, and we'll kind of end off and conclude on the challenges and problems that we have, whereby we could possibly work together and solve them. Okay, cool. So I start off with the history, and what we have over here is just a kind of quite a lengthy timeline around the inception of railways in South Africa. So thank you. So things started around about 1845.
Annelie.
Okay, so obviously at the time there had been no government in place, as we were all aware. So largely colonies that had been managing, overseeing various districts. So discussion about rail started around about 1845 in the Cape. All of these were the initiation of various private companies, entities wanting to establish rail for the purpose of industrialization and movement of goods. In 1845 in the Cape, there was discussion around the implementation of rail to move the most valuable commodities in the country at that point in time. That was brandy and wine. Okay. But the Attorney General was consulted to do a feasibility study, and at that point he advised that rail was not viable or feasible. Okay. Fast forward 15 years. Another discussion took place in Natal, Durban, where another company was set up, Natal Railway. And they eventually established a line, a very short one, from the Durban precinct to Isipingo and Mlazi, predominantly for the movement of sugarcane. Okay, the line was quite short, 2 miles, later extended to 5.5. Predominant traction power was steam locos at the time. It was very unreliable, and what the team had actually done over there, they'd often revert to oxen to pull wagons to continue with the perception that rail is great and valuable. Okay, pressure on the guys in the Cape. Another company was set up different to the first one, Cape Town Railway Dock Company. They then established a railway company and they start construction of a line, again to serve the wine industry. Okay, the line later extended to Wellington, Worcester, PE, Uitenhage, Kimberley, etc. Further extended in Cape Town to Wynberg, and the pure genesis was for the movement of grapes and wine. A little bit of a blip over here. In 86, in the Natal region, they started moving ores, coal between Durban and the Newcastle precinct, Glencore, Ladysmith, Talana. Quite surprisingly, it's about a century later and we still serve this mine in terms of moving export ore out of the country. So this kind of pressurized the other colonies in the other regions. And in 1890, in the Reef area, another company established, Rand Tram, where another short route was set up between the Boksburg coal mines and Johannesburg for the movement of coal. So these were all individual siloed railways that have been set up on different gauges, the Dutch speaking to their homeland, the British speaking to the UK as well. And then in 1982, everyone kind of started realizing that we need to link everything up. Okay. In 1894, there was the establishment of ZASM. Dr. Malaka, you can help me out there.
Nederland, Zuid-Afrikaanse, what's it again?
Spoorwegsmaatskappy.
Yeah, Spoorwegmaatschappij. Nederland, Zuid-Afrikaanse. Okay, I remember the name. Spoorwegmaatschappij, yeah.
For sure. A Dutch firm set up over there for the development and construction of rail. Again, weird story how the colonies influenced the manner in which the rail had been established. President Paul Kruger had preference in terms of constructing the line to Maputo as opposed to going to Durban due to the distrust between the British and the Dutch. Okay, and he preferred to go via Maputo. Yeah, a few years later, the link up continued. We again, the different colonies kind of established that we need to work with each other to ensure that the system is viable. Cool. So just the latter part of the timeline from pre to post democracy. Dr. Malaka covered this to an extent where, yeah, a lot of uncool things happened during this time, which significantly impacted and influenced our current position. So in 1986, the apartheid government released a De Villiers report where they kind of confirmed that let's disinvest in rail, let's deregulate it. And that kind of opened up the trucking industry. Obviously, these guys foresaw what was going to happen in '94, and it was kind of a strategic decision to ensure that the government coming in would be disadvantaged to an extent. Okay, 1988 deregulation occurred. 1990, the collaborative government existing as well as incoming worked collectively together to set up Transnet, and that kind of consolidated all of the various transport means, rail, harbors, etc. And then, as a result of what happened over here, it impacted our organization significantly in that, like Tatimilaka shared, the org structure was inherently uncompetitive. The colonial kind of heritage around the lines were more preference towards low speed, shorter, smaller trains. There was an absence of equitable road pricing. Road, to an extent, was unfairly advantaged because they would have public access to roads that was funded by the state, whereas on our end, we need to serve and maintain our infrastructure on our own. And this kind of led to a lot of the demise which we've seen in recent times, okay? Just getting to the point where we are now, 2022, and ma'am, you asked the question earlier in terms of private partnership. We, at this point in time, we plan to make various lines and slots available to private partners to move their goods and freight. I'm going to hand over to Tati Saasa.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my presentation will cover a comparison of the South African railway to railway roads. So as Ntatenaidu shared, that we are in a transition to move from a monopoly competition to a perfect competition. So what are the risks that are associated with the move, and what are the strategies that we can leverage from companies that already operate in that space? Right, so I'll cover key attributes of a rail transport company, summarize benchmarking results, comparing TFR to Class 1 railways in North America, also highlight some of the lessons learned from rail concessions in the African rail context, and lastly, distinguish between TFR and PRASA services. So first, in terms of the key attribute that I'll start with, it's track gauge. So this map provides a spectrum of rail gauges that are adopted globally, which ranges from 600 millimeters to about 1,676 millimeters. But before I touch on the map, so how do we define track gauge? It is the distance between the inner side of two parallel tracks. It determines the wheel spacing of rolling stock that can run safely on the network. Constraints, obviously, the train speed and also capacity in terms of tons per axle. Now, what are some of the factors that are taken into account when deciding on which track gauge to adopt? The first one is construction cost. So we know that the narrower the rail gauge, the lower the construction cost in terms of smaller structures, bridges, and tunnels that are needed to be constructed. The second one is growth potential. So what are the mining reserves that exist in a country, and what are some of the potential goods that can be transported through the railway system? The third one is interchangeability. So is there a need to interface with neighboring countries, and what are the rail gauges that are adopted across the fence? The last one is the terrain. So what is the envisioned track that we need to construct? Obviously, these decisions were made in the 18th and 19th century, so they still constrain the railway system today. Also, what is the footprint of the total track globally? We have over 1.3 billion kilometers of track. The standard track gauge is predominant with over 61%, followed by the broad gauge with 22%, and lastly, narrow gauge with about 18%. This chart here just shows the extension of rail infrastructure between 2014 and 2020, showing that our modern rail developers are adopting more of the standard gauge. So that does help in ensuring that we have an integrated system. So what is the track gauge that is adopted in South Africa? Cape gauge is the predominant track gauge, followed by a narrow gauge and standard gauge. It's about 0.2%. It's adopted by. So just a brief view of the map. The United States, North of Africa, Europe, Iran, China, and Australia adopted the standard gauge. We see the broad gauge in Russia, India, and Argentina, and lastly, the Sub-Saharan Africa adopting the Cape gauge. I think this obviously is such a high degree of variation, which further throws the implicates the rail system. So I think it's good to know that modern rail developers are adopting standard gauge, which will lower the complexity in the railway system and improve interfaces. So the second key attribute is route kilometer. So it's the distance train traverses. It excludes loops and tracks in the yard. So this chart over here looks at the ranking of countries by route kilometers. The United States leading with over 150,000 of track, followed by Russian Federation with over 85,000 kilometers. South Africa doing well in the top 10 with about 21,000 of track. I think this does show that we have an extensive railway system. And on the other side, we have railway goods transported, which basically shows goods that are transported through the railway system. It's measured in million ton kilometer. China leading with over 2.8 trillion ton kilometer. South Africa again performing well in the top 10. I think this two chart basically shows that we have one of the extensive railway system in the world. And it further narrows the list of countries that have significant rail infrastructure that we can actually compare ourselves. This line chart shows growth in goods transported through the railway system, a comparison between 1995 and 2007 shows an exponential growth of about 182%. And so the value proposition of the railway system is still pertinent today in terms of lowering the cost of logistics. I won't really go into detail on this slide. So we've narrowed down the list of countries that have significant railway infrastructure. So what are the dominant companies that operate railways in these countries, and what are the organizational structures or ownership? So we know there are some that are privately owned and some that are publicly owned. And I think the most important message with this particular slide is, as we enter a perfect competition system and vertically separate our railway infrastructure, what are some of the best strategies that we can leverage from these dominant railway companies? So this basically provides an aggregated ranking of TFR, comparing it to Class 1 railways. And this exercise was conducted in 2018, comparing 7 attributes, finance-based and train performance-based. It basically shows that we are ranked in the 8th positions. So obviously, new initiatives were initiated to improve our ranking. Obviously, with the COVID-19 pandemic, things have changed, but it will be interesting to read with this exercise to see if there is a step change in the ranking. So this map, it shows the status of railway concession in the African context. So green highlighting countries that do not have an existing rail concession. We are one of them, currently underway. And the countries that are shaded amber do have existing railway concessions, and the one shaded red have defunct railway concessions. So on the right-hand side, we have some of the reasons why the rail concessions failed. And I won't really go into detail, just to name a few: underestimation of investments needs. So Ntatemalaka highlighted that our asset value are over 200 billion rand. So it's important that we partner with companies that have the resources and expertise. And this slide just summarizes our first phase and initiative of selling some of the slots. So we'll initially focus on the container corridor between City Deep, Kroonstad and Durban, and also the southern corridor between Gauteng and East London. And the overarching goal of this exercise is to increase route density and also the increasing the railway capacity. So this is my last slide. So how do we distinguish between PRASA and Transnet Freight Rail? Touched on extensively on TFR, which operate freights of goods. PRASA operates commuter or passengers. It's divided into 2 sections, metro rail and mainline passengers. Metro being an urban commuter transport responsible for over 2 million passengers daily, Shosholoza and Premier classes, and the map basically shows the PRASA routes, right? So I think Tatona, I will continue with the next sections, focusing on the current state of our technology.
Thank you. Okay, cool. So you guys have seen this picture before. Tatmalaka presented this, and it kind of speaks to our organization through these attributes: the amount of revenue we generate, capital investment required per annum, our asset base largely informed by locomotives at about 50, 60 million a pop, wagons about 1.5 million a pop, employees, customers, the commodities we move, track kilometers, locos, wagons, the tons we move, and ODPs or routes whereby we move our goods. Okay, just another kind of interesting view. Some key KPIs. The quantum of revenue that we generate per hour is quite significant. Last year was a bit lower than normal, 4.3 million rand per hour. And our peak in 17-18, when we hit 226 million tons, we were generating about 5.2 million an hour. Not many firms can claim that. The challenges that we experience are significant. Last year, we lost about 1.7 billion rand in revenue and about 6.5 million tons as a result of theft, vandalism, sabotage, due to our economical situation in the country. Okay, and then kind of just a view or picture of the transactions that we kind of take through our cash register. These are some of the largest ones. So in the Western region, an export manganese train of 375 wagons. When we depart that train, that's a banking of 11.1 million rand for one train. Okay, export ore is a typo over here, 348 wagons. The departure of that train, 5.9 million rand. Export coal, the Eastern region from Ermelo to Richards Bay Coal Terminal, 200 wagons of coal, 3.2 million rand. They are significant, they are huge, but we must also bear in mind that these do not happen every few minutes or hours. If you look at the cycles informing these trains, for export manganese, it's got about an 8-day cycle turnaround time. Export ore, we're looking at about 4 days, and export coal, not great, not efficient, about 3.5 days. Okay, so those are our current actual cycles. And then kind of, this is just a picture to illustrate the point. On this side, it's a manganese train over there. These are manganese trains. Over here, it's iron ore from the Hotazel Northern Cape region to Saldanha. That gives you a view of the wagons. These are huge assets. It's significant in size. A train is maybe about 3 kilometers long, with the total consist of locomotives and wagons. So it's huge and requires quite an operation to run them. And then just kind of concluding our presentation as to why we're here, and possibly just work with you guys and use your expertise and skill set to solve our problems. Just a few use cases of OR in our organization, and a lot of it's been spoken about. So kind of trip scheduling, optimized picking, dispatching of trains to various sidings. There's a variable demand. The rolling stock we have available both in locomotives and wagons, which portions of our network are available. The operating models that we use, is it kind of meat pass or a double line? Timing parameters that informs the movement of the trains, two sidings, loading times, or is it guys with shovels and wheelbarrows, or is it actually rapid tipplers that's loading the ores into trains? Crew scheduling as an example. Payroll constitutes for one of our highest expenses in the organization at about 60% of our costs. So the management of overtime and the use of our team members are quite important. What route knowledge does the drivers have? Qualifications and certifications to back that? Did they have sufficient rest? What does the union variation agreement say in conjunction with the Basic Act of Employment? So these are kind of the constraints we work around to output a kind of viable schedule. Demand allocation. We are very fortunately one of the few organizations out there that has a problem with managing the demand in the market. So We need to take into account the margin that we make, densification, how much tons is moved between different OD pairs, the efficiency at which we move them, as well as the social imperative. So the likes of commodities that we move that assist the country does come at a loss for us. Grain, maize and wheat, containers, yeah, a number of them that kind of spurs GDP and job creation does come at a loss for ourselves. And then just lastly, everything that we do comes at significant cost, whether it's purchasing of assets or maintaining of our lines or assets. So how best do we optimize on our CapEx allocation to fix and purchase various things? So there are a million things that we need in terms of locos, wagons, and the network. What's profitable versus non-profitable? What's the condition of the network? So again, just a quick summary of use cases, problems that we solve on a daily basis, and how we could possibly use OR in our space. And then that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's a really nice presentation. So what is your strategy on building OR capacity in your organization? Is it a model where you would like to go into partnership, or you go the guys in the fancy suits, the consultants to solve your problems? What's the strategy?
I'm going to give you a short answer, and I'm going to let Tatimilaka follow up and support that. So we kind of the team, the analyst, the specialist. Tatimilaka is the executive manager that oversees us. And our current reality is that we're in complete firefighting mode. I think at this point in time, we are working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. That's business as usual in kind of answering various questions, using data sets to inform key decisions. I do not believe that we have resources internally to establish this capability at this point in time. So at least in my mind, and Tatimilaka, you can support, is that we do some sort of partnership whereby we bring resources in that would serve that function for us. You kind of, as an example, you would come in with your team, we explain what the challenge is, you create the model, we share the data, you give us the answer, and we work collaboratively. Maybe that would be the status quo for about a year or two, and then slowly but surely we can then build capacity internally to kind of take that function forward. That's my thinking, at least, and what we've discussed.
No, I think, yeah, that's exactly what we've discussed. And I think the first critical milestone was getting confidence in the methodology, right? And I think we've ticked that box now. And to Luciano's point, we're almost in constant firefighting mode. So developing internal capacity doesn't scale really well, right? So it needs to be some sort of a mixed approach where you have guys that mentor, but the briefs have to be tight and specific. I think there've been a lot of dysfunctional relationships between SOEs and consultants in the main, and that has kind of branded it really badly. But then, yeah, as long as the brief is tight and specific, I think there can be a lot of value to be added from a partnership that enables a mixed medium of skill. Yeah, because you want to answer the problem, but you want to make sure that you build the capacity as quickly as possible. So I think those would be the two objective functions.
And I think the approach to tackle it, on a smaller scale, to make it more manageable, I think that's probably a really good approach. The elephants rather do it bit better.
A question.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair.
As an ordinary consumer, one looks at Transnet particularly and says, my God. If you guys had actually come and painted a different picture, I was actually wondering why it's so. But before you answer, you might also look up. About 7 or 8 years ago, I was in Holland, just over a weekend when they were changing all their rail schedules over the whole country. People said to me, I'm crazy traveling on that boat. It's going to be incredible mess. In fact, the OR and planning team that handled that won the so-called Edelman Prize in the US. They'd actually got the whole system taking it from where it ended on Saturday night, with all the trains being at wherever they left them. And in one day, the Sunday, they got them all right. And when they ran on Monday, only one thing was wrong. One train ran 20 minutes late, but the rest were okay. Now, this should be an inspiration for you, I think, even though your TFR is not trust, if I gather. But there must be a lot that the OR if they can press final, they can press finance, or they sugar and fuel. The society must be able to help you guys. You guys must really. I just wish I was younger. So I can't help you, but thanks. It was an interesting presentation.
Thank you for the feedback. Thank you. And definitely aspirational in terms of working towards what those guys have pulled off on that side. That's phenomenal.
Last questions, or are you
I have a quick question.
happy about it?
Just wondering, the whole access to third party, is that going to significantly complicate your lives or not?
So do you want to take that?
Short answer.
Well, we believe that it's going to improve things. So with the benchmarking exercise that we've conducted, showing state-owned companies that operate in perfect competition, I think there has been significant growth. And obviously our goal is open up and grow innovation in the railway space. So by having more players, we'll have sufficient investments in renewing the railway network. But I think above everything, it's about time that we transform our railway system from a monopoly competition to perfect competition.
Thank you.
Well done.
Which we know. You will never be the CEO. No, that's trustworthy. You can still be successful if we.
We have to be on
We're working to the minute.
to the minute. Okay, welcome to everybody who joined. Our last session of today is about yogurt. Interesting enough to me. Annelie is a data analyst, that's what you said, at Shoprite Checkers. At the moment, completed at Stellenbosch last year. And she'll be presenting to us. You've got an opportunity here to diversify your language skills. Annelie will be presenting in Afrikaans. We asked her to have her slides in English. I've been listening to the Ukrainian president so much over the past few months that I've picked up a few words of Ukrainian. So you might learn a few things today. So Annelie, please, over to you.
Okay, so ek's Annelie, ek het hierdie navorsing gedoen vir my meesters, wat ek verlede jaar klaar gemaak het by Stellenbosch, onder die leiding van Dr. Potgieter, en ek wil net noem dat ek 'n beurshouer is van die Suid-Afrikaanse Akademie vir Wetenskap en Kuns, en daarom kom ek my navorsing in Afrikaans gedoen het. So 'n vinnige agtergrond, ek het by 'n jogurtfabriek my navorsing gedoen. Ek is 'n Ek is 'n groot voorstander vir data self insamel. So ek is daai persoon wat in die fabriek staan met my stophorlosie en elke jogurtbakkie se tyd opneem. So net vinnig, hier kom die melk word in die oggende afgelewer by die fabriek en dit gaan deur al die prosesse. Hierso kom die melk in, die jogurt in verskeie masjiene deur tot by hierdie area nommer 2 wat ons die lae risiko area noem. So daar kom die jogurt deur, skrikkelik warm daarso. Die jogurt word in hulle bakkies gesit, die bakkies word geseël. By elke masjien is daar pakkers by elke lyn. Die pakkers pak hierdie jogurtbakkies, maak nie saak in watter vorm dit kom, 150 gram, 6 pakke, 1 liters, wat ook al daar aankom. Hulle pak dit dan in hulle groter boksies of plastiekhouers, afhangende van hoe die kliënt dit vereis. Dan word daardie boksies of plastiekhouers weer op 'n palet gepak. Dan word dit toegedraai met plastiek. Dan vervoer iemand anders dit hier na area 3 toe waar ons koelkamers is. So hier's verskillende dele van die koelkamer. Hierdie noem ons 'n blaaskoeler, so verskeie kliënte het verskillende vereistes vir hulle produkte. So hierso sal ons al die produkte stoor wat nie preserveermiddels in het nie. So dit moet vinnig afgekoel word om dit so gou as moontlik by die kliënte uit te kry. In hierdie afdeling stoor ons die produkte wat wel preserveermiddels in het, so dit kan langer neem. So hier staan jogurt tot 24 uur voordat dit versprei word. By area 4 is 'n toedraai aanleg, so dan
Wasn't left at a single edge between 2 points.
So as ons by die toedraai aanleg kom, dan is die weepakkers by elke lyn, daar's 3 masjiene. Die palette word dan weer afgepak, so dan is ons weer terug by die boksies. Dan word die boksies deur die toedraai aanleg gestuur. As dit klaar toegedraai is, dan word dit weer op 'n palet gepak, weer toegedraai en dan word dit versprei of na die groot koelkamer toe of terug na daardie koelkamer waar dit weer daai kant toe versprei word. My navorsingsvraag was: watter veranderinge kan ons aanbring aan hierdie stelsel? Het sy dit 'n nuwe masjien is wat ons installeer? Wil ons masjiene dalk bietjie rondskuif? Wil ons die vloei van die fabriek verander? En wanneer ons hierdie veranderinge aanbring, watter uitwerking het dit op ons rente, ruimte en risikokostes? En daarna verwys ek na die rentekostes, is ons draagkoste, so hoe lank hierdie produk in ons fabriek staan, want hoe langer ons hierdie produk het, hoe duurder kos hy vir ons. Ons ruimtekoste, so ons het natuurlik stoorspasie in ons fabriek nodig om hierdie produk te hou, en dan ons risikokoste is, omdat jogurt so sensitief is vir tyd, temperatuur en al hierdie dinge, hoe langer hy by ons is, hoe korter is sy rakleeftyd in die winkel. So ons wil die produk so vinnig as moontlik deur die fabriek kry, sodat daar rakleeftyd optimaal kan wees en dat die kliënt, die verbruiker wat hierdie produk moet koop, die langste tydperk moontlik het om hierdie produk te koop, want wanneer hierdie produk sy vervaldatum bereik, word hy teruggestuur na die fabriek toe, dan dra die fabriek hierdie kostes. So ek het 'n paar doelwitte gehad en 'n stoel. Ek gaan vinnig vir julle vertel en vinnige na die literatuur verwys. Ek het 'n aanvanklike observasie gemaak in die fabriek. Ek het baie tyd daar spandeer. Ek het my data daar ingesamel. Ek het 'n simulasiemodel gebou en dan het ek na verskillende eksperimente gekyk om die model te evalueer en te kyk wat kan ons aan hierdie model verander en te kyk wat is die uitwerking daarvan. En dan baie belangrik vir my in my navorsing is om dan terug te gaan na die fabriek toe en te sê, dis wat ek gedoen het, dis wat ek gekry het. Kyk wat julle daarmee kan maak. So ek het net vinnig deur 'n bietjie literatuur gaan, so ek het diskrete gebeurtenis simulasie gebruik, so dit is belangrik net om weer te beklemtoon dat die agente, die jogurt kry hulle eienskappe voordat hulle deur die stelsel gaan, so ek weet wanneer die jogurt by die fabriek aankom of deur my masjiene gaan, weet ek reeds. Dit is 'n arbei-jogurt, dit word verpak in 'n 6-pakkie, dit gaan dis 'n A-produk, dit gaan verskillende produkte, hy moet toegedraai word, so lank gaan hy in die koelkamer staan en daartoe moet dit gaan. Daar's verskillende verskillende gebeurtenisse in die model en ons kan na verskillende wat-as scenario's kyk. Baie belangrik in jogurtfabrieke, dit is natuurlik vanselfsprekend, jogurt moet so vinnig as moontlik by die kliënt uitkom. En dit is absoluut tydsensitief. Dit is wel moeilik om vooruit te beplan, want ons weet nie altyd hoeveel melk ons die oggend gaan ontvang by die fabriek nie. Ons weet nie, as hierdie jogurt vervaardig word, is die komposisie reg van die jogurt om vir hierdie produk te maak, moet dit geskei word na 'n ander lyn. So dit is baie moeilik om te beplan en daar is natuurlik baie onsekerhede. 'n Paar stappe van my simulasie, so ons eers die probleem identifiseer en dit is dat die jogurt te veel hanteer word in die fabriek en te veel tyd spandeer in die fabriek. Dan om die data in te samel, wat gewoonlik die langste tyd neem as jy dit primêre data insamel. Die modelontwikkeling om seker te maak jou model is reg, verifikasie, validasie doen daarvan en dan natuurlik na die eksperimente kyk. So my aanvanklike observasie, ek het vir elke, daar's 8 lyne in die fabriek en ek het vir elke lyn so 'n model opgestel, so daar's 'n voorbeeld van die produk wat op daardie lyn byvoorbeeld gepak kan word, die grootte van die bakkies, hoeveel bakkies daar in 'n boksie kom, hoeveel boksies daar op 'n palet kom, elke tipe jogurt het 'n ander vereiste want dit gaan dalk na 'n ander kliënt toe, elke kliënt het sy eie vereistes en hoeveel werkers daar verbind is aan elke lyn. Hierdie is data wat ek van die fabriek ontvang het, so hulle kon vir my sê op watter lyn was daar tydens die dagskof en die nagskof watter hoeveelheid uitset. So hulle kon nie noodwendig vir my sê daardie spesifieke produk word daarop gepak nie, maar hulle kon die totale uitset vir my gee op elke lyn in die 2 skofte. En dan kon hulle ook hierdie data vir my gee, wat hulle die totale uitset in 'n week vir my kon gee. So hierso kon hulle vir my sê watter produk dit is, julle nie kan sien nie, en hulle kon sê op watter dag dit gepak is, maar hulle kon nie noodwendig vir my sê op watter lyn dit gepak is nie. So dit was nogals moeilik om hierdie 2 datastelle bymekaar te bring, en daarom was daar natuurlik 'n paar aannames gemaak. Net vinnig te verduidelik, ek het verpakkingstye, so as ek praat van verpakkingstye, dan verwys ek na wanneer die produk in die lae risiko area kom, so wanneer hy reg is vir ons om dit in die boksie te pak, tot wanneer daardie produk reg is op die palet om uit die lae risiko area na die koelkamers te gaan. En dan aftye is tyd wat ek noem wat die lyn stil staan. Dan kom maar nie jogurt uit nie, dan kom nie bakkies uit wat ons kan pak nie, daar gebeur niks op die lyn nie. Ek het al my data ingesamel met my stophorlosie daar gestaan vir elke lyn, elke bakkie gedruk, gestop, neergeskryf, met my wit jassie en my haar net alles. En natuurlik al die toetse gedoen om die beste verdelings vir al my datastelle te kry. Hierdie is hoe my skedule gelyk het vir byvoorbeeld lyn 7. So lyn 7 verpak 1 kilogram houers en 500 gram houers. So hierdie sal vir 'n week se skedule wees. So ek het vir elke lyn, het ek in daardie week kon ek spesifiseer word hierdie tipe jogurt in die dagskof op die nagskof gepak. Ook op watter lyne gaan, watter tipe jogurt dit is. So ek het onderskei tussen A-produkte en B-produkte. So A-produkte is produkte sonder preserveermiddels, so hulle moet so gou as moontlik uit. B-produkte kan staan langer in die yskaste, die koelkamers. Word die produk toegedraai, ja of nee? Wat is die boksie grootte? So hoeveel van die klein houertjies gaan in 'n boksie? Wat is die palet grootte? So hoeveel van die boksies gaan op 'n palet? En dan die totale liter wat tydens daardie loopie op die masjien verpak is. 'n Paar aannames wat ek moes maak, maar net om die gemiddelde verkyserspoed in die fabriek te kry. Bulk grootmaat jogurt wat ek uitgesluit het, is omtrent 10% van alle jogurt. Dit gaan nie deur die lyne nie. 'n Paar aannames wat ek moes maak, weer eens ook om my 2 datastelle bymekaar te kry. Ek het 'n konseptuele model geteken. So hier is ons weer by die lae risiko area met die 8 verskillende lyne waar dit verpak word tot op 'n palet en dan word dit nou vervoer na die verskeie koelkamers toe en na die toedraai aanleg sodat dit weer gereed is om te versprei. Ek het my model in AnyLogic gebou. Daar was vir elke lyn elke jogurtlyn, ons het sy eie lyn hierso, sal nou in meer detail na die komponente verwys. So hierso het ek lyn 3 as 'n voorbeeld. Kom my agente, dis die jogurtbakkies, kom hulle in groot maat, hulle kry reeds hulle eienskappe, hulle karaktereienskappe, soos hulle inkom, ek weet reeds, is dit 'n A of 'n B produk, moet hy toegedraai word daarvoor, watter tipe bakkie is dit? So dit is net 'n uittreksel uit my skedule, soos wat ek net vir julle gewys het. So sal al my jogurt ingevoer word in die model. Hierso word my jogurt omgeskakel van grootmaat jogurt na 'n bakkie toe. En dan gaan hy in die ry af en dan later word hy weer oorgeskakel na 'n boksie toe. Daar's ook verskillende funksies in plek gestel om te verseker dat daar nie jogurt agterbly in die lyn nie. So as daar sê nou maar 1000 liter jogurt deurgestuur word en daar bly nou 20 gram jogurt aan die einde oor, dan word die bakkie net volgemaak en deurgestoot sodat daar nie ou jogurt in die lyn bly vir die volgende loopie nie. Dus dan kom ons by die koelkamer, so hierso is 'n keuseveranderlike, deterministiese keuseveranderlike wat besluit, is dit 'n A-produk of 'n B-produk, soos 'n A-produk is, gaan hy dadelik na die blaaskoelers toe, daar spandeer hy 6 ure, om vinnig afgekoel te word, dan kan ons sê, moet hy toegedraai word, hy word toegedraai, en dan gaan hy weer terug na die groot koelkamers toe. As dit 'n B-produk is, gaan hy na 'n gewone koelkamers toe, waar hy 24 uur spandeer, moet hy toegedraai word, dan sal hy toegedraai word, andersins gaan hy na die koelkamer toe gereed om te versprei te word. Dis maar net hoe my keuseveranderlikes gelyk het, baie eenvoudig. By my toedraai aanleg, daar's 3 masjiene in die toedraai aanleg. Dit is wel, die fabriek het wel 'n nagereg afdeling ook, so om seker te maak dat daar genoeg kapasiteit vir die nagereg produkte is wat ook toegedraai moet word, het ek net 2 toedraai masjiene beskikbaar gestel vir jogurtprodukte, tensy daar meer as 7 pallette in die ry wag, dan skop die 3de masjien ook beskikbaar, dan is daar 3 masjiene wat reg is om die jogurtprodukte toe te draai. Sodra daar minder as 8 pallette in die ry is, dan word die een masjien weer toegemaak. So baie belangrik, verifikasie. Ek het baie verskillende verifikasiemetodes gedoen. Hierdie was my insetverifikasie, so ek het my model gehardloop, om gestop op 'n liekrake oomblik gekyk. Dit is Dinsdag, my skedule sê dit moet nou 80 gram 6 pakke pak, is dit wat in my model gepap word? Is dit die regte spoed teen wat die masjien pak? Is dit die regte uitset wat daar plaasvind? So het ek vir elke lyn hierdie getoets op klomp verskillende liekrake oomblikke. Gekyk, is dit die regte hoeveelheid bakkies wat in 'n boksie is? Daardie tipe ding, en dan het ek ook na my uitset gekyk, so my model het vir my presies gesê wat gepak word op watter lyn, teen watter spoed, watter tipe produk, al sy eienskappe, so ek kon presies gaan kyk, sê nou maar by lyn 5, hierso sê hy die volgende loopie, is nou 10:10, dit gaan oor 25 minute begin, en dan kan ek gaan kyk by lyn 5, daar begin loopie 3, is 25 minute later, dit is wat hy pak, hy moet nie toegedraai word, dit is 'n A-produk, hy moet blaaskoeler toe gaan, dis die grootte van die produk. So ek kon ten alle tye sien presies wat in my model aangaan. En dan ook net na ander komponente gekyk, is die verwagte uitkoms in die model wanneer hy hardloop, dit wat ek ingevoer het. So ek het ook konseptuele gesigswaarde validasie gedoen, so ek het 'n 2D model gebou, ek het weer eens liekrake skermkopieë geneem en vir die produksiebestuurder gestuur en gesê, maak dit sin dat daar op 'n Woensdagoggend 6:30 soveel pallette in die blaaskoeler is, soveel pallette in die koelkamer en soveel pallette in die toedraai aanleg. Dan het ek ook historiese datavalidering gedoen, net om te kyk, die liters wat ek ingestoot het in my model, is dit wat daar werklik in die model is. Ek het na 'n paar eksperimente gekyk, Ek het gekyk op lyn 4 op die oomblik is daar 'n robot geïnstalleer, so dit skakel een pakker uit. Ek het gekyk, kan ons daardie robot ook op lyn 3 en lyn 2 installeer en wat die uitwerking daarvan is op die totale tyd wat hierdie produkte in ons fabriek spandeer. Ek het gekyk na 'n toedraaimasjien skuif vanaf die toedraai aanleg tot by die verpakkingsmasjien. Ek het gekyk na wanneer ons hierdie toedraaimasjiene skuif, so 'n bietjie aan die vloei verander, hulle eers die produkte eers toedraai en dan koelkamer toe stuur. En dan by scenario 4 het ek gaan kyk wat is die uitwerking van blaasvrieskaste. So blaasvrieskaste is nuwe tegnologie waar die afkoelingstydperk vir produkte wat in daardie blaasvrieskas gesit word 3 ure is. So dit gaan vanselfsprekend die tyd wat hierdie produkte in die fabriek spandeer baie afbring. So die twee scenario's wat die beste resultate gelewer het, is scenario 2. Dit is waar ek die toedraaimasjien geskuif het uit die toedraai aanleg tot reg langs die vervoerband waar die jogurt uitkom. So dit sal beteken die jogurt kom in sy bakkie en hy word dadelik in die boksie op die vervoerband gesit om toegedraai te word. So ons skakel al daai oorpak op die palet af van die palet af op die vervoerband weer af op die palet. Skakel ons uit, skakel baie hantering uit en ons skakel ook 3 werknemers hier uit en ons verbeter ook die ledigheid hierso van werknemers, so hulle hoef nie so lank te wag voor hulle weer kan werk nie. So hierso sal julle sien die ledigheid van my werknemers het baie afgeneem. Hulle was meer besig geweest, wat goed is, ons het nou minder werknemers, maar ons benut hulle beter. En dan natuurlik die blaasvrieskaste wat ek geïnstalleer het in die groot koelkamers en in die blaaskoeler. Vanselfsprekend gaan dit die tyd wat produkte in die fabriek spandeer baie afneem. Want hierdie produkte sal dan van 24 uur, in plaas van 24 uur in die koelkamer, sal dit dan net 3 ure staan en hierdie is van 6 na 3 ure. Ek het ook dit verskillende situasies hierso getoets, so ek het gekyk wat as ons net die A-produkte in blaasvrieskaste sit, wat as ons net die B-produkte in blaasvrieskaste sit en wat gebeur as ons albei in blaasvrieskaste sit. Want blaasvrieskaste neem natuurlik meer spasie op. So ek het minder vloerspasie vir my produkte, so ek moet seker maak dat die tyd wat ek wen wel geregverdig word, maar daar nog steeds genoeg spasie is vir my produkte. En dan net hierso kan ons duidelik sien hoe die blaasvrieskaste die tyd wat hierdie B-produkte en die A-produkte in die fabriek spandeer baie drasties afneem. En dan het ek aan die fabriek terugvoer gegee. Ek het vir hulle 'n nie tegniese verslag saamgestel en vir hulle presies gesê wat ek ondersoek het, waar ek dink hulle probleemareas lê, wat moontlik kan gebeur, moontlike opeenhopings, moontlike oortolligheid van werknemers en dan vir hulle 'n bietjie van die resultate verduidelik en gesê dit is waartoe hulle kan werk sou hulle hierdie veranderinge aanbring. Dan net sou ek aangaan met die navorsing, sal ek graag net wil kyk na risiko-analise vir kapasiteit in die fabriek. So ek weet die fabriek is op die oomblik besig om te kyk om hulle fabriek te vergroot. So net om te kyk wat is hierdie impak wat as ons nou hierdie blaasvrieskaste en goed insit, kan dit nog steeds 'n verhoogde volume uitset hanteer. Wat sal gebeur as hulle addisionele lyne insit? Loop die grootte is natuurlik altyd 'n groot besprekingspunt en dan sal ek graag my werkers as eie entiteite wil simuleer in my model.
Exactly 20 minutes. Any questions? Vrae?
Nie van jogurt.
Minder nou nadat ek met dit gewerk het.
Question was whether she likes yogurt. Sorry.
Couple of months now after
Yes.
the initial runs, what is the factory looking like now after you've given them their
I
report?
actually haven't been in there. They're so strict with their policies going in. You have to sign forms and everything. I would actually like to go back. I did obviously send them it, but I know they are busy in the process of expanding. So I would actually be very interested in seeing what they did.
Working with an industry and a business that's very technical and on the yogurt industry, was it difficult to convince them of your ideas and your implementations?
No, they were actually very open to listening to everything I have to say. They have their own engineers working on the same problem, so they were quite aware of all their challenges. No, they made so much effort and time for me and to listen to what I did and also to help me in my studies. So yeah, no, I think they were really invested as well.
Then just a question perhaps from me, what did you find difficult about this process, if anything? I mean, what was the most?
A lot of things actually, because it's such a real life problem. You want to get it as close as possible to the actual situation, which obviously isn't possible to get a simulation model exactly as what's happening in the factory. I think being a perfectionist, that that was quite difficult to accept when I couldn't get things exactly as it happens in the factory. Yeah, otherwise I enjoyed it, especially working with an industry partner.
Right, thank you. If there aren't any other questions. Good. For your attention.
Bye.